Captains, welcome to the playoff stage of the international tournament King of the Seas 16, featuring 3 EU teams and 1 Chinese team. I'm your host for today, Gaishui Shoku, one of the NA community managers and 2-time second place COTS champion. And I'll be joined for today by our analyst, Bazinga Flux.
Hello everybody, I'm Baz, also known as Bazinga Flux. I am a member of Rain. I've won King of the Sea, WMI, and multiple clan battle seasons. And our casters for today are the Sailing Robin and Zui.
We are here, but we just can't get seen yet because the camera's not working.
We're back.
Here we go.
Hey.
There we go. Welcome, gentlemen.
Zui,
Hey.
welcome back, everybody. Very excited to be here today. I mean, obviously, this is the day, the finals of this King of the Sea 16 tournament, so really excited about this. How are you feeling about today?
Feeling pretty good. Had a pretty decent rest between the 2 days, and we're down to the top 4 teams in the world. Obviously, the 3 EU teams making it all the way through the group stage, as well as the kind of maybe the little bit of a surprise, the Chinese team TSYMQ making it all the way through that group stage into the playoffs brackets for the first time.
And the first game we will be reviewing today, it will actually be Rain versus this
Yes.
Chinese
Yeah.
team. So it's going to be interesting, and I hope everybody's ready because we're going to see some good action
Yep.
today.
All right. Hope you guys are ready to dive into those games today, as they should be quite cool. We can take a look at the schedule for today, where, as they mentioned, we will be seeing Rain versus TSYMQ for our first match. Both of those are the first seed from their respective servers, Rain being from EU, TSYMQ being from the China server, and they're actually starting in the losers bracket.
Yeah, given that they finished 3rd and 4th, or they finished 2nd in their groups respectively, they are in the losers bracket and they will be playing each other to progress in the tournament. If they lose, they will come out as the 4th place.
Did that surprise you yesterday, seeing Rain not go quite as far as we might have expected them to?
Not necessarily. I think their form was a bit shaky during the regional playoffs, and they obviously showed a very good showing against 3X. However, Shaft and 3X obviously playing very well. So did TSYMQ yesterday. We saw some amazing games out of them, some different strategies to what people would normally
The
expect.
one battleship was quite
Exactly.
interesting. All right, after that, we'll be watching the losers bracket final, of course, and then the grand finals. So not too complex of a day today. We'll just be moving right through those 3 series. You can see here that in the winners bracket final, which we unfortunately will not be covering, will be Shaft and 3X. The loser of that match will go down to the losers bracket final, where they'll face the winner of Rain or TSYMQ. Do you have any predictions for our first series for today?
I would like to see TSYMQ play their unique strategies again, and if they do end up doing that, it is possible they catch Rain out and get a win. I would like to see that happen. However, given the expertise and long time competitive standing, I am favoring Rain to win this one.
All right, we can get into a little bit more detail once we see all the map and picks and such, but for now, let's go over the Twitch drops to see what you guys at home can get for today. This is, of course, day 2 of weekend number 4, so you guys, after watching for enough time, will get a mission to complete for blue boosters, as well as a final reward, the space camouflage, the COTS space camouflage for the Vermont, which is quite a cool camouflage. You can see here, basically space shuttle themed, has very distinctive features in the gun sleeves, the brick-like texture for the heat shielding, radiators, even a massive booster on the back that will go off when you accelerate that not very
Looks
fast ship, but it has pretty
very
good
cool.
acceleration. So
Visually very
yes,
appealing.
it is visually awesome. Note that this camo will not be in the game until 12.10. So if you finish the mission in the time before the patch drops this coming week, then have no fear, you will get the reward, the camouflage, when the patch drops. Also, good to note for today is that if you have lots of channel points, you'll be able to use those for today throughout the day to redeem things such as more economic rewards and distant voyage camouflage containers. So keep an eye out for those. They will be on a cooldown, but you will get the chance to use all those channel points, which is a pretty new feature. So excited for that. All right. We can take a look at the prizes for today as well for our teams. Note that since we have already completed the regional stage, of course, all these prizes at the top have already been distributed to our teams. The first place team is getting 7,500 steel, 8,000 doubloons, 1 maiden steel style, a bunch of COTS camouflages, a ton of boosters, and of course that Vermont camouflage that we just saw. And for today, we'll be playing for those monetary prizes at the very bottom. What's the grand prize,
so
Vance?
the grand prize of $17,500. That's obviously what all the teams are playing for. If you don't make it that far, though, the second place is winning $10,000. The third place being $7,500. The fourth place, that is basically guaranteed for all of these teams, is the $5,000 cash prize.
Yep, we're at the top 4 teams now, so all these teams will be guaranteed to at least get $5,000, and they'll just be duking it out to see the order in which they receive those prizes. Excited to see who takes the grand prize today. And we also have a shirt.
Indeed, we do.
We actually have one to show to you guys today. You can see it over there, but also on camera now. After I unfold it. We have the XVI Space Camouflage shirt with the wonderful logo there. It's a very good material. It actually saved my life a couple days ago after we took a walk in the rain, so I can highly recommend this. If you're interested in getting it for yourself, you can scan that QR code or go to the link there to get it off of our store. So hope you guys will enjoy that. And then for today, we have 3X, of course, defending champions. We can take a look at some of their previous placements. You can see that they have a pretty long and storied history of being known as several different names with some phenomenal logos that have improved in quality over the years. What were they previously known as, Baz?
Obviously, they were the original name they had was TWA. Then they went to Band CV, and as of late, they were PTA, and the very new name that they have now is 3X.
So although we do have 3 different names, they are all the same team, and they have 4 previous COTS wins going back to COTS 11 and even a few before that. But now they'll be competing for COTS 16 as 3X. In the past, we have seen Vor from the Asia server take a COTS as well. And now we'll have a TSYMQ from the Chinese server in the running as well. So it should be quite interesting to see how that goes. All right, we can take a look at some general tournament information now as a refresher for you guys. So you get a sense of what's going on today. And we have a bunch of different maps in the pool, including some new ones. Do you want to start taking us through this?
Sure. So Estuary is a new map with new cap layout compared to random battles. Obviously, the 2 mid caps being very small, very hard to take. Shatter we have seen before, but with different cap layouts this time. Sleeping Giant as well we have seen before, but with the Thunderdome cap being moved slightly outside it, as well as the cap on the east being moved farther away from the islands.
Yeah, of course, for all these maps, especially Shatter and Sleeping Giant, those caps before being moved were quite easy to lock down since they had islands in the middle and such that were quite safe to set something like a Destroyer on. And now it requires a little bit more active gameplay. No more rushing Marseilles or Klebers or Henry Fords into the Thunderdome.
Encourages more dynamic gameplay.
Yep. And then moving on, we'll have Warrior's Path, of course, also with the cap moved for the aforementioned reasons. We'll have Faroe Islands, which is a new map as well. 2 COTS has also recently been added to the game over the last year. This is one of our 4 cap layouts, so it can play a little bit more slowly, and it's also a diagonal setup. Do you have any thoughts on how that changes the general gameplay pattern?
It is an interesting one. Obviously, the 4 cap layout being a different cap layout to all of the other ones has some different types of play styles. You can go for the off caps, or you can do a home cap push. Both of those styles have their, pros and cons, but the diagonal cap layout obviously means that there's more room for the ships to move. Yep,
and then we'll have Northern Waters, a competitive classic, kind of similar to one that is not in the pool right now, but also is called North. It's very long-standing, they're very symmetrical, lots of different strategies that can be played on them, so it is one that teams like to play a lot. You'll usually see it picked quite often. And then we have a new map new layout for Loop. Want to talk to us about Loop, why we might not see it as much?
Sure. Loop is a map that obviously is also one of those 4 cap maps, but due to the 4 cap layout, it tends to have games that go very quickly, given the tick rate of those caps. And after you get 1 cap, usually one team starts steamrolling in terms of points, and it's very hard to come back.
Can be very difficult, especially if a team manages to get those home caps under their control, since they have a very small area of the map that they actually have to defend in order to actually take the game. So those, I believe we've seen the average match duration for Loop actually be around 12 minutes. Well, for some of our other maps, it tends to go up towards even, I believe, 15 to 16 minutes for Faroe Islands. So definitely tends to play a little bit quicker due to that tick rate. All right, let's go through some of the general restriction information for you guys, since we do have a relatively large amount of them, just to refresh you guys on how they work and why teams might be playing some of the ship picks that they are. Well, obviously, we don't see Nevsky in this tournament because it's banned. Why would it be banned?
Nevsky is obviously an amazing cruiser, has amazing ballistics, has a radar, and it is one of those ships that you can smoke very effectively, and it will be able to deal out a lot of damage. as well as be able to control a significant amount of the map.
Right, that 19-kilometer range and very flat ballistics, plus the 12-kilometer radar, makes it basically the premier choice for sitting in a smokescreen.
Absolutely.
And then the Brisbane, after that, also has the 12-kilometer radar. Is usually not picked over the Nevsky, but with the Nevsky gone, Brisbane is basically the de facto choice, right?
Absolutely.
And then we have that max of 1 pool. Why do we have those 3 ships in there, Baz?
So Moskva obviously is one of those Russian cruisers that have amazing arcs on the shells. So the shells are very fast, really easy to land on fast destroyers, for example. With the use of the unique upgrade, it also has amazing accuracy. Compared to its brethren of the Russian cruisers, it has better DPM in terms of HE and has an average armor scheme, so it can tank quite a lot.
Right, and then the other Soviet cruiser in there, Petropavlovsk, of course, very tanky. We've seen the ship a lot. When it's unrestricted, it tends to be very, very good in large numbers, so only max of 1 there. When it is restricted to 1, sometimes Moskva is the better choice, just because the radar duration is much longer, and it has a little bit more HE DPM, but for certain maps, like we might see on Estuary, for example, today, and some of these other close-range maps such as Shatter, Petropavlovsk can be the superior choice due to its better pushing power. And what about St. Vincent?
Vincent is obviously one of those battleships that can do everything. It has amazing HE, amazing AP performance as well, and it is one of the fastest battleships at tier 10. So it can do quite a lot of things, and previously we've seen when Vincent was unrestricted, it becoming the meta battleship, replacing pretty much every other battleship, and it was creating a bit of a toxic dynamic.
Yep, so note that for this max of 1, that means if you take one of these ships, those other 2 options are unavailable. Then we have our main restriction pool, the max of 3 here, where a lot of ships are lumped in here, as well as other restriction pools. And here we have some of the destroyer picks, such as Gdansk, Kleber, Marceau, Ragnar. 2 of these, the Gdansk and Ragnar, provide a lot of radar control. The Marceau and Kleber, of course, being those French destroyers that are very fast, can give you a lot of cap control. Then we have something like the Des Moines, which is kind of the de facto smoke cruiser after the Brisbane and Nevsky. Is kind of a competitive mainstay, has never really not been meta.
Absolutely, yeah. It is one of the best ships at tier 10 in terms of cruisers, has good DPM with HE and amazing AP, has the improved auto bounce angles and better pen. Obviously, it has the radar as well to help with being smoked up near caps and provide cap control.
Yep, definitely just a very solid pick overall, and we'll probably see a fair number of those today when they're not banned. Then going on for cruises, we also have the Napoli, the Stalingrad. These 2 quite tanky. The Stalingrad gets a little bit more 12-kilometer radar control, but the Napoli, I think a lot of people don't appreciate the Napoli. Why is it so strong?
It obviously has amazing armor. It is one of the tankiest cruisers in the game right now. It can tank a lot of damage. It can push very effectively, and also has those sap secondaries that are very devastating.
Right, definitely one of the best close quarters combat cruisers in the game, and a very good choice for a weak flank. And Stalingrad, of course, that radar control. Kremlin, Ohio, and 2 of the strongest battleship picks for COD, since they combine a lot of survivability with really good gun power. So you'll see them pretty often when they're not restricted. For the destroyers that we just went over, the Gdansk, the Marceau, the Ragnar, of course, very strong, very fast. They put out a lot of damage in the Ragnar and the Gdansk. Give a lot of radar control as a second-line destroyer behind something like a Daring, for example, taking the cap. And the Napoli we discussed, max of 1. So if you take 1 Napoli, can't take more than 1, obviously.
Napoli, yeah.
And it will also restrict your other options in that max of 3 pool. So moving on, we can take a look at our specific matchup for today, Rain versus TSYMQ, and go over some of the stats for these teams. See what they like to pick, what they like to ban. You can see that TSYMQ likes to ban Marseille a lot, whereas Rain likes to ban Des Moines a lot. I think we'll actually see a little bit of that flipped a little bit in our series today once we move on to that. But for now, we can see TSYMQ actually likes to play Des Moines a lot, whereas Rain picks the Daring. Do you have any insight into these picks and bans?
It's interesting. I think we can say why TSYMQ plays the Des Moines. Obviously, it is one of the competitive mainstays, as we said before, and it provides a lot of control gameplay. And TSYMQ, from watching them yesterday in particular, we saw quite a lot of favorance towards that control playstyle, trying to hold the majority of the map under their own control. And so Des Moines is a really good ship for that. Whereas Rain maybe want to make some pushes happen, do a bit of different varied gameplay than just being control focused.
Rain, definitely one of the European teams that we've seen do pretty well with both control and push strats. They're very flexible in their lineups. We have seen them play control obviously very successfully, but they also are one of the, I would say it's less typical for European teams to play this aggro playstyle, but Rain has pulled it off quite successfully, including in the Grand Finals versus 3X. For ship appearance, note that this includes when the ship is banned. So a team that likes to ban and pick the ship a lot ends up as appearance, and Des Moines, I think, actually takes the stat for the tournament overall, so not surprising to see it here. It is banned or picked in almost every single game. For highest win rate, Rain actually with the Minotaur is their highest win rate ship.
That's very interesting. Yes, that is surprising. This is probably likely because of the Des Moines bans against Rain, and as a result, them having to pick a minnow. However, the Stalingrad pick being the highest win rate for TSYMQ is rather interesting.
Stalingrad, I think, one of those ships that we used to see a lot in times past, but has kind of fallen a little bit out of favor compared to ships like Petropavlovsk or Moskva, or even Des Moines, in that I believe after the commander skill changes where it no longer has fire prevention, those 60-second fires that you can light double fires on it somewhat consistently makes it a little bit more difficult for it to play those island positions that a Moskva, for example, might take. So seeing it picked here a lot for TSYMQ as their highest win rate ship, definitely a little surprising, but it still gives that crossfire capability with the very high penetration AP shells. For map bans, TSYMQ actually likes to ban Warrior's Path and Northern Waters somewhat equally. Pretty surprising bans for me, since these are some of the, I would say, mainstay maps for a lot of teams, and that teams are usually pretty comfortable with them.
Northern Waters in particular is a crowd favorite. Most teams are more than happy to play them because it is a balanced map from both of the sides, and it is usually the map that most teams favor picking over other maps.
Right. Estuary, I'm not surprised to see as a ban for Rain. But we actually have seen them have some pretty strong strats on it, so it feels like they're still very well practiced for it when they do have to pick it, so it should be interesting to see what they choose to do with that today. Rain obviously likes to pick Northern Waters a lot. We've covered that yesterday as well, as the teams like to pick this map again. Symmetrical, a lot of teams are very comfortable with it, have a lot of strats for it. TSYMQ also opting to pick Faroe Islands pretty frequently was somewhat surprising to me. It seems like they've generally opted for a strategy where they're more comfortable on the maps that a lot of teams aren't as practiced on.
Yes.
Which can definitely be a pretty good competitive advantage. All right. So those are the stats for our teams today that we'll be seeing in our first matchup. Now we can kind of move on to the general bracket structure for today to give you guys a short reminder of the playoff stage. We have that. We can just move on to the best of three here. So the first map, this is actually, I think, one of the most interesting map lineups that we've seen so far. Shatter, Loop, and Estuary, of course, being maps that you generally don't see picked very often.
No. Obviously, all three of these maps have potential for push plays, and Shatter and Estuary in particular favor that play style, in my opinion. Whereas Loop may be a bit more control-oriented, but you want to play for the caps very aggressively.
All right, so let's take a look at our first map here, Shatter, and I think the ship bans actually might reveal a little bit of why people are picking these maps for this series, where TSYMQ has actually opted to ban the Des Moines, and Rain has opted to ban the Clever.
Yeah.
Now, you want to speak to a little bit as to how this might influence these maps that we usually don't see?
Absolutely. So Des Moines on Shatter in particular is very strong. It has a lot of island cover, and Des Moines definitely favors having maps with more islands. However, obviously, it is more than comfortable playing in a smoke, where the eastern side of the map is quite open for this. And with the Des Moines ban, we're likely going to see minnows instead. I think both teams are more than comfortable in playing that ship, so I'm likely, predicting at least one Minotaur pick.
Yeah, I would definitely not be surprised with Des Moines being banned out. That Minotaur, as we have seen in the tournament, is kind of the replacement for that, since it still has a 10-kilometer long-duration radar. Usually Minotaur is something that you don't see too often in tournaments because it's quite prone to exploding.
Yes.
But with the restriction set up here, it's still one of the stronger radar picks, and teams have been having to get a little comfortable with learning how to play it.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's not only banning Des Moines is always a good choice, but essentially forcing the enemy team into playing a ship that they might not be comfortable with is a good strategy as well.
Right.
Unfortunately, I think this deep into the tournament, most teams are going to be comfortable playing any ship that they're forced into playing.
Yeah, these teams that are basically the best of their regions, very practiced, of course, with essentially any lineup that they might have to play. I was somewhat surprised to see the Clever ban coming out from Rain here, since this is one of the ships that they've used quite successfully in the tournament so far, especially in the EU regional stage. Do you think that this might be a sign that they're not looking to play as aggressive of a strategy?
It is a possibility. I couldn't predict this one, obviously you can substitute a Kleber for a Marceau, which can do some similar things.
Right.
Maybe not to the same extent as a Kleber can in terms of rushing people out. However, it is still very capable of farming people down, especially over some of the islands. The Marceau has significantly worse arcs in comparison to the Kleber. So there may be a strat involving playing a Marceau and having a position that they have figured out where TSYMQ is likely going to put a ship, and they will use the Marceau to farm it out.
Yeah, I would say Marceau definitely one of those ships that you're likely to see somewhat often. It is, of course, in a max of 1 pool, so you can't take it a Gdansk or a Ragnar if you pick it, and of course you can have more than one Marceau. Whereas Kleber is one of those ships that you can take multiple of if you so choose. So banning it out here still leaves that Marceau option open, but stops teams from taking multiple French destroyers. I believe our teams are ready here, so I'm pretty excited to get into our first match. I think both these teams are quite strong. They've shown some exceptional play over the last day or so, as well as the regional tournaments. Any final thoughts before we get into the game here?
I'm hoping to see some sort of one battleship play from TSYMQ. We saw it yesterday. It was very interesting. I hope they use it again and play their own game instead of trying to counter-strike terrain. And I hope it's a great game.
All right, well, let's go to our map intro video and then to our casters, and we'll see you guys in the first game of the first series of the day.
The picturesque coastlines of the maritime provinces of eastern Canada form the backdrop for a titanic clash of opposing fleets. These steep cliffs and jagged rocks will soon echo the thunder of heavy guns, and only one team will emerge supreme. This is Shatter. Shatter is a 48 by 48 kilometer domination-style map with 3 cap points running in a line from west to east. In this new configuration, Cap Alpha on the left is arguably the safest for destroyers. Though there are plenty of nearby islands within radar range, the cap perimeter is wide open, providing unfettered access and a multitude of ways in and out. This directly contrasts with Capture Point Bravo in the center, which is more claustrophobic and has only a handful of entrances and exits. Ships caught out here typically fall under tremendous focus fire from both map edges. On the right, control of the new Charlie Cap is likely to depend heavily on commanding the island on the western edge. Expect teams to deploy ships both south of this island and to the 9-10 line on the extreme eastern edge as they vie for dominance. 18 ships, 2 teams, 1 victor. It's time to play Shatter.
Alrighty, welcome to this first game between TSYMQ and Rain. TSYMQ not starting the day off slowly, bringing in Schlieffen, Preußen, Petro, Minotaur, Colbert, Napoli, Shimakaze, Harugumo, and Marceau into this first game on Shatter. On the Rain side, spawning in the south, it is going to be a Vermont, Schlieffen, as their battleships San Martin, Salem, Moskva, Stalingrad, 2 Darings, and a Gdansk as their 3 destroyers. So TSYMQ bringing out the Colbert for the first time in the internationals.
I'm going to pay attention to what exactly they're going to do with this. Rain obviously coming in with Double Daring on Shatter. It was sort of expected. This Congo line around these islands cover can be really, really dangerous. I understand why they picked these 2 ships. Vermont obviously being the star of this tournament.
Oh yeah.
Unrestricted battleship with such a massive salvo. We've seen what they can do throughout the entire weekends. But yeah, this Colbert, very interesting. We might see an early TSYMQ B cap here with the Marceau that's sending it with the speed boost all the way to the middle. And it doesn't seem like Rain will have anything to prevent that.
Yeah, so Rain and actually TSYMQ both opting for those German battleships. On this map, there's tons of close island cover for these ships, and they can kind of really make use of that 6-kilometer hydro, especially to lock down areas of the map. And then obviously that secondary threat from these German battleships, so important when they can kind of get to these closer range engagements fairly safely. TSYMQ bringing in that Colbert, we did see it once actually in the NA regionals, I feel like it didn't do a ton of work when it was sitting behind the island. So we'll see if TSYMQ can kind of make this thing happen, because TSYMQ has shown a lot of quite different strategy compared to the other teams in the tournament, and Colbert, hopefully they can find some use for it.
That's true. I mean, this Marceau on TSYMQ will actually get the cap early, that's a guarantee, and he'll be free to go. Meanwhile, Rain is sending Gdansk Daring around the A cap. It's going to be interesting because it's going to be 3 versus 5 on this A side here. I mean, I guess Rain also has the Vermont in the play, Malimu, which is going to probably get like a G5 central position, try to get some crossfires on whatever's going on the 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. But I'm looking forward to see exactly how they plan to use this Colbert. Why do you think they would pick such cruiser on this map? Because we know Colbert can be extremely hard to hit, but when it does get hit, it has a tendency of blowing up fairly quickly.
Yeah, so Colbert, especially on this map, it's actually being played in the exact same position it was on the NA tournament. Same map, same position, right behind this island here between A and B. I think teams have kind of figured out that maybe there's a spot here where it can kind of fire those shells over the islands, get some good damage output onto especially those central battleship positions without being spotted. So that looks like it's going to be what they're trying to do here, but he has to be really careful about controlling his firing angles, because if he gets spotted by anything out on the wide flank on A, it's going to be trouble for him. Looks like, though, his team is playing pretty hard towards that A side. They're going to be bringing both of their radar cruisers, the Petro and the Minotaur, over to that side, so should be able to force ranged destroyers away.
We had the very early radar here from Gangbarang, did not manage to catch TSYMQ's Harugumo in the smoke here, but now, unfortunately, Entaro in the daring is being radared by the radar Minotaur from TSYMQ, and now this Colbert, if he gets around this island, this Colbert is going to start raining, and now if he keeps going this way, he might be facing a crossfire from the Harugumo here, because the Gdansk has used the radar already, so I see why they're using the Colbert. They kind of want to pin this area in A, and basically pin this daring as long as they possibly can.
Yeah, and that Minotaur radar definitely lasts long enough for that Harugumo to kind of make it out to the wider flank, though. There is going to be some return fire going into the Haru if he opens up now, because he is out of his smoke screen.
That's true. The Harugumo from TSYMQ obviously pushing in really hard. The Petropavlovsk radar from TSYMQ might as well be cycled to keep this daring spotted. And here we go. A lot of aggressivity on TSYMQ to get Entaro out of here. The Gdansk Gangbarang is going to engage on this Harugumo, which could be really dangerous for her. He doesn't have smoke anymore. He smoked the Minotaur instead. So
and he's pretty close to that Salem as well. Amazing in the Salem, adding on his gunpowder now to that Harugumo.
That's a lot of damage being poured on Angela Sama here. He has to disengage, otherwise he risks just going down.
Yeah, and TSYMQ is using kind of that little lull in time, though, to push their Petro all the way up into the cap, actually.
Man, they might be able to pick this Harugumo kill. He is still spotted somehow. Even the Vermont, even Malimu is going to probably try to get some... And that's it. That's it. Rain bags the first kill of that game. Bit of a mistake. Harugumo being too aggressive to try and get that daring out of there.
Yeah, and TSYMQ has managed to park that Petro into the cap now fairly safely, but if they can't get onto the other side of this daring, he should be fairly safe where he is.
We've seen yesterday a situation where the Petropavlovsk was on this exact position and it didn't really ended up well for them. So this is interesting. Meanwhile, on the other side, Rain has managed to capture Charlie. Nothing really that TSYMQ can do with a Napoli and a Shimakaze. No radars on this at all.
And I want you to come look at the Colbert now, because he is walking up to the next rock. He's been shot at by Dastard Schlieffen, but managed to kind of get off of that fairly undamaged.
Oh, but yeah, there's going to be a lot of AP shells going towards that Colbert. I wonder what exactly was spotting it. Was he firing?
He fired once, I believe, at the daring, but is dark now behind that island. He's trying to kind of get the island between him and the daring so that he doesn't get spotted, but I believe...
They don't like this daring position at all. Yeah, and now TSYMQ's Petropavlovsk being hard spotted by the daring's hydroacoustic is going to be under Gdansk fire for a long, long time, and this could be problematic for him. Gdansk has basically Kleber with a permanent main battery rail booster.
Yep. Lots of damage output coming out of that destroyer. Really,
Definitely.
the only downside is that it doesn't have that French saturation. So
True.
if it does start taking hits, it can go down fairly quickly compared to Colbert.
Look at what TSYMQ is doing here. They have also pushed a Schlieffen in here. Newly still firing. That's really dangerous because Stalingrad kind of matched the Colbert as far as I understand.
Yes,
and they're pouring a lot of shots already on him.
Yeah, and he's trying to kind of limit that angle of fire. Like I said before, he's just trying to use those bad ballistics to lob shells over the islands, keep himself concealed from the enemy cruisers, but it looks like he's not quite able to do that just about yet. He's actually being spotted by the Vermont spotter plane.
Spotter plane, correct, yes. We eventually, I mean, look, I don't think they know, I don't think Entaro knows that the Minotaur here is actually coming around. Entaro could be in a bit of trouble, but I think he's actually going to try and make a rush on this Petropavlovsk here. He doesn't know that the Minotaur is right there, so this could be really problematic for him.
Yeah,
he is
here
spotted.
He comes around that island. The Minotaur does now have that firing angle onto the daring, just barely around the island. And let's see if he can make those single-line torpedoes work. He's actually going for those full spreads against the Petro, who's bow on. So.
Yes, they come. Oh, I see. They might not even lose that daring. And he gets the torpedo.
Yes.
The torpedoes actually miss, but Malimu gets the broadside reversing.
Yeah, and Taro down to 600 HP. They will trade out that daring just barely, but it looks like this should leave that A cap open for TSYMQ's Marceau to pick it up, and he is already in position to do so. So a very quick rotation over to that A cap.
And Amazing's Salem's radar is down for another 85 seconds, so they are going to be able to get this this A cap.
Yeah, so far in this game, pretty nice movement, I think, around the map by TSYMQ, using their Colbert and Minotaur to dig out that destroyer, opening up the cap for their Marceau, who is already in position to take that cap right away. So
that's correct.
Not letting those points bleed too much.
Really good rotation on this. They kind of forced that daring to make that rush on the Petropavlovsk, but it actually was a bad trade for them. We see the prediction today as well, 21% in favor of TSYMQ, 79% in favor of Rain, but I mean, the game is still up, and considering the position right now of TSYMQ, they've pushed the Preußen into Bravo, they have a Schlieffen and a Colbert staged for some very aggressive defense on B. We see the Gdansk radar spotting the Marceau. Is it going to be enough actually for him to stay lit for too long? No, he managed to actually disengage from this.
Yeah, and actually, I just want to call back attention to that prediction. 79% sounds like a lot, but that is the lowest odds Rain has ever been given by the viewers. So apparently, the viewers are liking TSYMQ's chances a lot more than the other teams that Rain has faced.
I like that. So far, TSYMQ has the cap advantage. They're going to start bleeding that point lead that Rain had by bagging the Harugumo very early, because the stalemate at A basically didn't yield any points for either teams.
It looks like Rain's going to be able to pick up that A cap, though, because without that Harugumo on the field, it's going to be really difficult for Renown's Minotaur to make his way back into the game. Obviously, Minotaur very, very squishy outside of those smoke screens.
He has radar for, like, the Minotaur has a radar in 30 seconds, but I don't think it will be enough to actually prevent Gangbarang from getting A cap back, and this could be a bit problematic for them. I mean, Minotaur versus Salem is definitely into Amazing's position. They lost the Harugumo, so the Minotaur cannot even smoke him anymore.
That's the problem, really. The Harugumo is such a linchpin on the team for both sides, because not only does it provide a lot of gun power and torpedo power itself, it's kind of the thing that enables that Minotaur to work in the game. And without that smoke screen, Minotaur has to play extremely cautiously.
Rain getting the advantage back on the points here, forcing TSYMQ to once again make some moves, and here we go. Here we see the radar from Renown here, catching that Gdansk keys deep into the radar, but that means Minotaur has to be extremely careful. Malimu doesn't really have the angle on the Vermont salvo, but you know, he might be able to get it, and this could be devastating for Renown's Minotaur here.
It's like Renown trying to make his way onto the rock before Malimu can get the shot off,
Here's
but
the
here
salvo.
comes that Vermont shot.
Can he get to cover in time, actually?
Oh, it looks like he does.
Really, really good play on this aggressive Minotaur push, pushing Gangbarang all the way. Unfortunately, TSYMQ's Marceau is not in a position to actually get into the A cap again. Salem doesn't have the full radar coverage of A. That's the struggle with Salem's radar. It's only 8.5 kilometers. But eventually, now that they've pushed Gangbarang all the way back, this Marceau can make a maneuver and get back into A again.
It looks like Norley's Colbert did come under a little bit of fire yet again, but he has found that little spot against the island where he's not spotted while firing, and he's just starting to pump out the damage onto Dastard Schlieffen. So
scratching the paint of the Schlieffen at the same time. Yeah, this Colbert has been under a tremendous fire here. They're even trying to blind fire her from range, which
very
is
close actually
really,
on
really,
that blind fire.
But now we're gonna see actually a Napoli chasing down a San Martin here. That Napoli is trying to make some sort of aggressive push, I guess, to try and get something happening on the 9-10 line. This San Martin can just basically kite him for ages.
Yeah, this is one of those kind of like rock versus rock fights where neither of the ships particularly is in danger from the other. They'll just kind of both live forever.
I think Napoli has a much better chance of chunking the San Martin with some decent AP salvo here, but he has to be careful because we might see some crossfires coming in from the real ship Shady.
The ship Shady is reversing for that crossfire right now, but it looks like Little Lemon might be able to get his nose tucked away behind that island before the Stalingrad shots become a problem, though that will mean he has to give a little bit more side to the San Martin, and that's when the damage starts coming in.
It is, yeah. Turning out right now is really scary, and he might actually start doing this. We are seeing actually a lot of damage being poured on Gunner here in the Schlieffen. TSYMQ Schlieffen pushing in the middle of the map right now, trying to spot some stuff, get some actions going. Lukar in the Moskva is going to be pushed away, and it seems like it's a double push actually, because even the Preußen is getting out of his position to try and engage the Moskva.
TSYMQ just kind of bringing their HP to bear here in the middle of the map. They have no control over that A and C cap still, so it looks like they're just trying to use those battleships to pick up some kills in the middle of the map. But Daster is in such a great position. He can escape behind this island very quickly if he needs to.
Rain he's done trying to play cat and mouse with A. They've put Malimu de Vermont into Alpha, so basically say, hey, you want to take A, you have to go for me. And somehow, look at what's going on. This Marceau from TSYMQ, speed boosting, unfortunately, into Gdansk radar, is about to get spotted, but he might be able to pull off a rush on Malimu's Vermont here. He is lit for a few more seconds from the Gdansk radar, but is it going to be enough to actually get enough guns on him in time?
Yeah, how do you think he should approach this rush? Because he should probably go from the bow, right?
I'm not sure. Does he prefer to face Salem's Wrath or Daring's DPM and Gdansk?
Yeah, so that's really the problem here. I feel like Rain has pretty much already covered this rush opportunity before it even happened.
But this Marceau is very healthy. Can he actually make the move in time? Malimu killing the Colbert across the map. That Colbert was actually reversing to try and assist that Marceau rush. Can they actually kill him in time?
That's the question. He's about 7,000
Malimu just
HP.
fired. Remember, Malimu just fired. He will not have guns on target for it.
As the Marceau comes around, the Salem's gun starting to add into the fray now. It looks like he got at least one side of torpedoes out. He will go down, obviously.
They're looking awfully off targets. Malimu will survive this, and we see a
the
complete
kills
wipe.
coming in from the side of Rain will secure them this first game. A lot of interesting positions taken by TSYMQ quite early in the match, but not able to convert that into caps and kills in the end.
It's true, they had cap control at least on the early time when they captured A. But Rain had everything prepared to counter this, and they end up winning that game. I don't want to say fairly easily, but without that much resistance near the end.
Yeah, I think TSYMQ, especially the loss of that Harugumo early on in the match, that really hurt them, because Minotaur, without a smokescreen to cover it, really can't move around the map all that much. And you saw he kind of just was forced to take a rock position, use the radar once or twice, and then he was done.
Mm-hmm. But we saw some interesting attempts, at least from TSYMQ, and they have to be commended for at least trying stuff.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, I think that, especially that Marceau play, that kind of shows just the practice that Rain actually. We've been talking a lot about TSYMQ. Rain obviously covering that rush angle exceptionally well.
Yeah, with like 2 DDDs and Salem. So Studio, what do you think?
I have to say, I think overall that was just really clean execution from Rain. I think we saw that their strategy basically didn't really end up with any holes in it or any key mistakes. TSYMQ, actually, I did like their initial deployment, their early strategy, and I think they actually had a pretty good game plan in mind, which was essentially to play for the A-B caps at the start, fast cap it with the Marceau, which they did successfully, and then look for the pick on A, which they very intentionally set up for with that interesting ship pick. Yeah,
absolutely. We have to speak about the Colbert. That was the ship that they wanted to use to snipe out the island position that the Daring from Rain used. I guess it wasn't as effective as they intended it to be, as eventually the Rain Daring just YOLO'd the Petro, gets traded. But it is actually a favor trade in terms of TSYMQ's favor here, since they immediately got that cap with the Marceau that had rotated over. So it was a good trade for TSYMQ, and they got the cap with it. Unfortunately, due to the fact that the Harugumo was maybe a bit too greedy, ended up dying. So the Minnow was really unable to make any good, impactful plays.
I think that's the key mistake that we have to talk about here, is that Harugumo. I think they were a little bit overzealous with their execution of the strategy, where it seemed the Colbert did its job of actually forcing the Daring to move forward along the island, which does expose it to fire from the one line. But the Harugumo, of course, right after laying that smoke for the Minotaur, has no way to easily disengage.
Yes.
And Rain, I think, set up basically perfectly for it by immediately moving their Gdansk out to the one line after the Daring took the rock position and was just ready to receive it.
Right, yeah. Speaking of Rain's deployments and strat, like the global strat they played, we have seen pretty much this exact same strat when they played 3X in the grand finals of the European tournament.
Right.
And we also saw the same deployment from the Petropavlovs that went into the A-cap from TSYMQ. This is the same thing that happened. The 3X Petro went into the A-cap and got farmed out in that game. However, in this game, they decided we should rather just YOLO it and get it out of the game as soon as possible. Even if it's a trade, it would have been something that they probably accounted for, given the fact that the Minnow can no longer have free play on that side with the smoke.
I think given that the Harugumo went down, Rain was more than happy to trade 1-for-1, since after removing the Petro from the rock, even though TSYMQ does own the cap at the moment, a Marceau and a Minotaur alone can't really stop the Gdansk from getting back onto the cap and just slipping it. And at that point, it's basically impossible for TSYMQ to play the A cap again. And unfortunately, yeah, go ahead.
For a second, it looks on that very scene here that the Daring actually missed the Congo line on the Petropavlovsk.
Yeah.
It was Vermont salvo who removed the Petropavlovsk. If it wasn't for this, it wouldn't have been a trade at all. They would have lost the gearing for nothing.
Yeah, of course, actually very important to mention that. Thank you, Robin, that the Vermont actually was ready for the reverse here of the Petro. And actually, if he didn't have that shot, it would have been a complete disaster for Rain.
Absolutely.
Since the Daring actually didn't quite account for the turning of the Petropavlovsk, slightly throwing off the nose torps. You do have a very small target to hit there, so it can be easy to slightly misjudge it. But again, that speaks to the execution of Rain here and the coordination that the Vermont was ready for that.
Ready for anything.
Exactly. Also interesting, about mid-game into the map, we saw TSYMQ's Preußen and Schlieffen positioned very aggressively. They were on the mid-line, preparing for a Rain push that may have been coming. Unfortunately, I believe they were never going to push the middle, given the fact that they were always playing for the A and the C caps.
Yeah, I think we saw that TSYMQ basically set up only for the A and B side with no intention of playing C side. So once their strategy fell apart at A, well, they did have that very strong hold over the middle with the Preußen and Schlieffen setup. It doesn't really accomplish anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having battleships in the middle of the map is obviously very interesting in terms of being able to move them around. However, when you're so deep into the game, the points have ticked so far, it is quite difficult to make any good plays out of them. So it kind of becomes like you are having good map control, however, it's not effective.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if TSYMQ had been a little bit more careful with their Harugumo, if they had played that a little bit more slowly, they probably would have had a pretty good chance of this game because that early B cap can be quite impactful. But we did see that Rain opted to play the map a little bit more evenly, spreading out their forces a little bit. I would say their C side probably was still a little bit more weakly favored since the San Martin was deployed there. But ultimately, they could just rotate ships through the C cap and then bring them over to AB where the real fight was. So again, very well executed by Rain. We can go ahead and probably take a look at the render here, which I think we just got in, and break this down in a little bit more detail for you guys. All right, take us away, Bez. Again, that early deployment that we spoke about from TSYMQ with the very early play onto the B cap there. Very smart idea getting a cap early here, especially the B cap, which is pretty hard to contest later on in the game after ships get set up. Always a good idea. And at this stage, you can really see that TSYMQ is playing for that A side.
Yes, very heavily. So they have, what, 5 ships that are like essentially ready to defend or push into A. However, the Colbert obviously makes that move over to the E4 block. Same with the Schlieffen a bit later on in the game. Here we also see the Harugumo laying his smoke for the Minnow on the A cap. But then he decides to go for the gunfight with the Daring without a smoke, with basically no help.
We can see here that maybe TSYMQ wasn't expecting the Gdansk to be out on the one line that early. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't have gone for that fight.
Possibly.
So, I think the initial deployment here from Rain is actually quite interesting that the Gdansk is right behind the Daring for A cap. I think probably in case the Marceau had chosen that as his first cap. But
it could have been a trap play that they had set up, given the fact that they'd seen a Marceau with the Daring diving the cap and the Gdansk behind it to radar it immediately. It could have been very good in terms of having just a destroyer kill at the start of the game.
And then we can see, of course, the good reaction from Rain here in that once they don't see that happening, the Gdansk going out straight to the one line here just completely shuts down this Harugumo play, especially in combination with the Salem, able to just put too much fire onto this guy for him to survive. Keep in mind that, of course, without a smoke, it is 20 seconds before he can go dark after shooting his guns, and that's more than enough time for these ships to put him out of his misery. Oh, we can move it forward a little bit here. We can see that Rain has quite the good setup on C here. The Daring just moving over to the middle after capping. And from this point on, it's really just down to Rain continuing to trade 1-for-1 and actually just holding the control.
Yeah, we can see here that the Schlieffen and the Preußen obviously being set up in middle. The Preußen's Hydro actually pushing the Daring away. And them having the B cap control was a thing for the entirety of the game. Unfortunately, the ship trades didn't go in their favor, and the cap trades were mostly in Rain's favor.
Right, at this point in the game, this Petropavlovsk on A is basically all Rain needs to deal with in order to actually convert the A control